every problem at every school that I've ever been to, it's a communication problem.
Struggling to get your team on board with new initiatives? Do you notice more whispers in the halls than enthusiasm in meetings? Your leadership credibility could be on the line. Ready to change the game? It all starts with credibility. Let's dive into this conversation with Doug Fisher. What does it mean to you to be a credible leader?
So there's a whole body of research on teacher credibility, and it essentially says, can I learn from you? And there are some factors. Do I believe I can learn from you? And that is more powerful than any strategy we have. If a student says, I can learn from this teacher, I have trust. So then the extension in the world of leader credibility is, are you a credible leader who I am willing to follow? And there's some components of it. First of all, do I trust you? That's the foundation. If I don't trust you as a leader, and I'm always wondering if you have my best interest in heart, or you're going to be reliable and honest, that's the foundation. After that, there are actions and behaviors that leaders convey that build credibility. And people know who is a credible leader, who we say, you know what, I'm willing to implement this initiative because I trust my leader. I'm willing to try this out. I'm willing to go the extra mile for this because I trust that leader. When you don't have strong credibility, it's really hard to enact your vision, your initiatives, your programs, because people don't follow you.
You started the book with an anecdote, and it was about a leader is explaining this cool new initiative. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, I would totally get behind that initiative. But then I reread it again, imagining a leader of the past who I didn't think was credible. And you can just imagine the collective eye roll. So I think everybody in the audience can commiserate with that feeling of he's at it again.
One more time, one more initiative. Here we go again.
Yes. So if I'm a leader and I'm not quite
sure. Let me pause on that for a moment. What you just said, it's the same initiative.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's the same initiative. Whether or not it is embraced is the leader's credibility. It's the person who introduces and says, this is an area we should go, and keeps on it and massaging it. It's the leader's credibility that allows that initiative to take hold or not.
Okay, I'm going to read a quote from you because I think it summarizes this concept nicely. You said, keep your promises, do what you say you will, give credit where credit is due, acknowledge mistakes, don't talk about others behind their back, don't withhold information, don't belittle others, be consistent and be accountable. So can you talk about, to me, this really naturally connects the idea of vulnerability and credibility. Yep. Might you speak to those?
Sure. And so being vulnerable is part of this benevolence idea of trust and relational trust. And all of those things you just named from there, have people notice them. People take inventory of them. We have a scorecard, if you will, with people, how much high trust do I have with you? And my trust with you is a little lower. And all of that gets added up. All of those little factors get added up. Being vulnerable, being willing to say, I don't know this, but I'm going to find it out. Being willing to say, you know what, I'm really not comfortable in this situation, and here's what I do to help myself in that situation. Just being a real person, being vulnerable, not pretending or conveying a message that we know it all. We know a lot. That's why we were chosen to be in these seats. We have experience and training, and yet situations arise where we can model vulnerability. We can model failure. I have a failure resume, and I share it. And here are all the things I failed about.
So important. And I feel like vulnerability is really having its day in the sun. Mm-hmm. But when you connect it to this concept of credibility, I think it almost supercharges it.
Yeah, it's not just being vulnerable. Because the people who work with us also want to know that you have confidence, that you walk in the world, and you're the leader of this school or this organization, the school system, and I want to know you can make decisions. I want to know you can communicate. So being vulnerable is part of it, but you also have to have some competence. That's why you got the job. That's the thing. You got the job, and so you get some what we call role trust just by getting the job.
100%.
Stages of trust, and yet starts off with role trust. Then people start to look at your behaviors and how consistent you are, and you move out of role trust into more like practice trust. And there's levels of trust we can develop.
I probably shouldn't even say this, but I used to always joke that every school has its own box of lies. Yep. And you never know what the box of lies will be. But it's like you're saying, it's you come in and you're like, this is a great school, it's great leadership. And then something happens and you're like, I'm going to assume the best. And you're like, it's a little harder to assume the best
A little
But
dent in the armor there, and then now I'm looking for additional evidence.
right. And so I think that's so important as leaders is to figure out, where do you currently stand? Because if you've dented and broken that trust, it's a hard road back to
Yeah,
credibility.
yeah, absolutely. So
Mm.
I said competence. Let me shift a little bit. But it turns out that the people who report to us generally judge our competence based on communication
Oh,
versus people that we report to judge our skills or our performance. The vast majority have never been an administrator. Now, there are always some exceptions. Someone said, I don't want to be a principal anymore. I'm going to go back to teaching or whatever. But the vast majority have never done it. So they really don't know what the skills or performance is like for a leader. So they judge competence based on communication.
mm,
And so this was really enlightening to me. And how we communicate, how often we communicate, the ways in which we communicate build this sense of this is a competent leader because I have the information I need. I feel informed. I am able to negotiate if I want to have a conversation and I can get my perspective and I'm heard, I'm listened to. All of that is in communication. And it's so fascinating that that's how we're being judged for competence. But
yeah.
our bosses come in and say, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, and we get an evaluation on our performance, which might be a tiny bit of communication. Every problem at every school that I've ever been to, it's a communication problem. And every solution to every problem is more communication. Reality is we get hundreds of emails. Many of them we don't read, but it's not that. It's when people say we need more communication. What they're really looking for is increased competence in communication from their leader. So here's a system I use. If you make my cell phone ring and you are a certain person, I will stop what I am doing and answer this phone call. For example, if one of these people called me right now while we're in this conversation on a podcast, I would say, I got to take a quick break, and I would answer them. That is number one priority. Now, I've taught them what I believe is an emergency, a crisis that I have to be interrupted no matter what. And sometimes people make mistakes and we have to learn from those mistakes. If you text me, it's important, and I have 45 minutes to get back to you.
Okay.
And if you email me, it's 24 to 48 hours. It's not a crisis. Don't email me an emergency, and don't text me something that you could have emailed me. And I have taught everyone around me, we all use the same system. We all know if you make that phone ring, it is right now critical. It's important. And if you text, it's a little bit different, and then you email. So as a result, the leaders here don't spend a lot of time in offices answering email. They have email time.
Smart.
And you probably know, because we were communicating on email, you'll get a flood of email from me, and then you won't hear from me for many hours. And then you'll get another flood of emails because I manage that form of communication differently than I manage texting and I manage phone calls. So whatever system, I'm not saying it has to be my system that we all use here, but you got to manage a system, because if not, people are going to say you're not an effective communicator, and thus you are not an effective leader because you're not credible with me. And the liability is, if people put emergency stuff in email and you don't answer for 24 hours, you're in trouble. Whatever system it is, we got to build a system of communication because it has a huge impact on our credibility and our ability to get our work done.
The School Leaders Project is an initiative by Toddle, your all-in-one teaching and learning platform made for teachers and by teachers. We started as a passion project in a school that thought that teaching tech should be as cool as teaching teams, and we're now loved by more than 1,500 progressive K-12 schools all around the world. It's such an interesting problem statement to solve for, because you're saying the number one factor that's going to influence perception is communication. Mm-hmm. And to turn that into a practical system is so logical, but I've never heard of any leader. I've never worked in a school where a leader communicated that to me. Mm-hmm. And what a game changer, because it takes away to the fear. Like, I would never want to text my administrator, but now they know, oh, this is an appropriate time. Right. It's clear success criteria for something that clearly matters to your team. Right.
And by the way, personally, I deleted the email program off my cell phone.
What?
Because I know. Because the number, like the email number on that little app, was making me anxious at night. And I was like, I'm going to do 5 more emails. I'm going to do 10 more emails. And it was taking away from my time with family and friends. And so I had a hard time managing it, because I see, oh, the number's going up. It's 100, it's 102, it's 106. So I would go on, and at 9 o'clock at night, I'm answering emails, and it doesn't let you decompress from the day.
No.
If someone needs to text me at night or someone needs to call me at night, that's different. But I deleted the email app off my phone.
Smart.
So I have to go to my computer to go to email, which helped me manage that that I need some downtime, some reflection time, some connection with other friends and family time. And that really helped me. That has helped me a lot manage that. Other people are going to say I would never delete my email app and whatever, but you got to
But
be careful managing like your life and work balance.
well, that comes back to being an instructional leader. Because if I'm your teacher and I receive an email response at 9:36 p.m., the expectation now is that I should be responding to emails at 9:36
That's
p.m.
right.
So in every choice we make, we must walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Wellness is important. 11:30 p.m. email, like
That's right.
that
That's
doesn't
right.
align.
Right. That's right.
I like that. Okay, let's get into nitty gritty because you talked about one of the essential traits, but you break credibility down into 4 essential traits, which are trust, competence, dynamism, and immediacy. So you've
Mm-hmm.
talked a little bit about competence. Might you dive into those other 3 traits and how they
Sure.
lead to a sense of competence?
Sure. Yeah. And I would say trust is foundational, that we have to start with trust. That trust is the foundation on which credibility is built. If we violate trust, it doesn't matter how charismatic you are. You violated trust. So trust is foundational. There are things we can do to repair trust. There are things we can do to be trustworthy. We can demonstrate that. You also talked about vulnerability earlier. That is part of trust. Benevolence. Do I believe you have my best interest at heart? So when
Mm.
you're saying a teacher at your school, do you do you as a teacher believe, do you as the person who works in the front office doing attendance, do you believe I have your best interest at heart? And if you do, your trust in me will be higher. When you have dynamism, there's a certain passion and experience people have with you. Now, it has to fit with your personality. If it's fake, everyone notices it. But this idea of dynamism is that I'm dynamic in my leadership. I am I'm when I present information, it's accurate, it's compelling. It's this way of being in the world where your personality comes through. It
Mm.
reinforces trust, because if you try to be fake in one part of your life and a different part of your life, people notice that. Dynamism can be difficult for people who assume leadership roles in the school where they already worked as a teacher, because people knew you in a certain way, and it is hard to make that transition. And so what you will hear is you're no longer you're fake, you join the dark side, all of this narrative. And it's all about your dynamism. Now, when you
Okay.
go to a new building, you have to develop trust first, and then people watch your dynamism, the passion, the charisma, all of those things you bring. When you go to immediacy, that's a term in psychology that's related and connected. Are you relatable? Do I feel a connection to you? Are you accessible? So, one of the things I think about is this idea of an open door policy. And we all have had this, like, oh, we've been socialized to have open doors. The problem with open doors is that only certain people have the position or privilege to walk in that open door. So, what we do here, take the number of teachers divided by the number of leaders, and we go to our group. So, let's say there's 100 teachers and 2 leaders, that's 50 each. Go to 10% a day, that's 5. So, 5 every day gets you a 2-week window to see everybody that's a direct report. And you have a quick, it's called rounding. You have a quick rounding conversation. What's working well? Do you have the things you need to do your job? Is there anybody I should recognize? What's the best thing that happened today? It opens the conversation with people. And because they know they're going to have a time to check in with you, they will save what would have been go to your door, and they would save that for the next time you round with them. But being very systematic in making connections improves your immediacy. It improves your connectedness, relatedness, this idea that we are in this together and we have a shared vision of where we're going as a school or as a school system. One of the things that ruins our dynamism, by the way, is PowerPoints. We see awful PowerPoints, probably because we're working 9 o'clock at night, because our doors were open all day long and people coming out of our office all day long. So we have to make a speech or a meeting or PowerPoint or whatever. And it models really bad instructional practices.
Didactic, not
Yeah,
inquiry led.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 25 words on a slide, no images. And it models bad practice. And teachers like, if I did that in a class, my kids would check out. So there's so much. We're always on display as leaders,
Mm.
always. And so when we have a bad PowerPoint, and we don't need a PowerPoint for anything, people put their speaking notes in the PowerPoint, put them on a piece of paper, and people know you need notes to talk from. That's not a problem. So all of that all of these things are impacting the credibility we have with people we work with. Again, foundation is trust. Once we work on trust, then they're going to probably move into communication and competence. And then after that, you have these combined dynamism and immediacy factors that start to reinforce one another. I see your passion. I want to be part of that. When you speak, you're prepared, you're credible, what you're saying is trustworthy. It all starts to intertwine with each other.
Well, and they all come back to communication. Every example that you've given is a facet of communication. So
Right.
I hope that leaders are hearing that as a through line, that potentially your banter or your chat is good, but if your slideshows aren't on point, if your
Yep.
emails are weird, if it's not clear how to get in touch with you, that's where credibility really falls apart. And I don't think that was a big takeaway for me. It's a cool aha.
It was a surprise in reading the research on this and saying, it's amazing how much, we're social animals, so communication is super important to us. And report to us, they watch our communication.
Yes.
Who's favored in our communication? What's our nonverbal communication saying? Who does the principal sit next to in the staff meeting? Does the admin team sit all together? Everything is being noticed. And it sends a powerful message. Like, we're not connected because the principal never sits with third grade. And they start to talk about that, and they should. Why does the principal never sit with third grade? Maybe he doesn't like third grade, like that kind of stuff.
Your book ends with the importance of being, you call it a forward-thinking leader.
Yeah.
So can you define what you mean by a forward-thinking leader?
Yeah. So your ability to forecast trends and put systems in place to address the future. It doesn't have to be 5-year strategic plan, although it could be. It's that employees want to know they're part of an organization. They want to know where they are going and where the organization is going, and how they fit into that plan. That is one of the major differences between teacher credibility and leader credibility. The staff want to know where the organization is headed. They want optimism, not idealism and not pessimism. The research is really clear on this. People want optimistic leaders who believe that together the future of the organization is brighter than it is right now.
Collective
And they
efficacy.
need to hear that. They need to hear that optimism, and they need to hear the plans that go in place. They need to know how they fit into those plans. That's part of our initiative work, like putting in programs and things in place, which only get implemented if you're credible. But in reality, in the research, only about 3% of leaders' time is spent on forward thinking. We have to have standing times where we talk about the future with our leadership teams. You can make a committee that focuses on the future. How do we think about what do we need to be aware of in the next few months? What do we need to be thinking about for next school year? I would say the vast majority of leaders right now, because this is October, are talking about the holidays, planning the holidays. By February, our brains are on to the next school year. And so we have an inclination to talk about the future, to think about the future, to plan for the future, but we don't make it as transparent and obvious to all the people who work in our schools. And they want to know, where's the organization going? Do I fit into this vision of the organization in the future? To do that, you got to know yourself pretty well. You got to collect information. Like these podcasts, that's what they're powerful, because it's not just knowing yourself. That is important. But it's also knowing enough about what's happening in the world and our profession to start to say, that's a direction I want to go. And when they feel part of that, when they feel the goals of the organization are aligned with theirs, they start to get these moral rewards of teaching. These moral rewards, like, I am part of an organization that is mission driven. I believe in the mission. I understand my role in the mission, and together we're having a great impact. When that all happens, job satisfaction goes up. People feel good about their work. And by the way, they're less likely to go other places because they feel this sense of connection. They feel this sense of responsibility.
To me, it mirrors how we began the conversation. It's just this idea of you've got your finger on the pulse as the leader, and you're being responsive to that. You're modeling innovative best practices that respond to that. And above all else, you're keeping why at the center. You're not hiding your intentionality. It's, hey, this is a problem that we've seen, a pattern we've noticed. These are the steps we're taking. What do you think?
Yep.
And what more do you need from your school leader? That's what you need from your school leader. You say that the greatest suggestion you can give to a forward-thinking leader is that they preserve time for their personal growth.
Yep.
Why do you think it's so important that we as leaders modeling learning?
Well, first of all, it's the content we're learning. So when we're acquiring, like I read this Forbes thing that I think the average CEO of a Fortune 500 company reads 60 books a year. And I may have the numbers slightly off, but they're consuming a lot of information, thinking about the world because they're leading these major corporations. That's part of this, is do we have time to be thinking and digesting and growing our vision of where our schools or districts can be? That's part of it. It's also showing the rest of the faculty that we're all on a learning journey. We say all the time, we're lifelong learners. We prepare lifelong learners. Do we model the way? Do we talk about things we are currently learning about? We have to model that we're continuing to learn. And as we learn, we change. Learning means growth and change. It's, it's not just acquiring knowledge. It's like, what are we doing differently as a result of this level of learning? Because when you model the way, you open the door for other people to do it. And you start thinking about what's next for your organization and where to and how and why, all of that things that leaders' brains get consumed with.
Beautiful.